Okay, so we've let our motherboard cool down now, and ready to start putting everything back together. This is a little bit more time consuming than taking it apart, believe it or not, and really just kind of requires careful, close attention and a lot of patience and maybe a little bit of manual dexterity. So I'm not going to film this entire process. I'm kind of just going to cut together some highlights because really most of it's pretty straightforwardly boring and just involves kind of jiggling stuff around so it gets seated. So what I'm going to do is show you kind of the order in which stuff should go back together and highlight a couple of points where you might have a little bit of trouble or where I've noticed things tend to get particularly tricky. And yeah, so let's get started. So the first thing, basically we're just going to go backwards here. So the first thing you want to do is put this CMOS battery back in. That's just going to go there. And get that underneath the little clip there. And just pop it in. There we go. Alright, next, actually, before we even start reassembling this, I can't believe I almost forgot that, we're going to need to put the thermal paste on this stuff. Make sure it gets conductivity. So let me go get a tube of Arctic 5 and show you how to do that. That's really important. Okay, so this is what the little tube of Arctic Silver 5 looks like. This is basically just a silver compound that's non-conductive, non-electrically conductive, but that conducts heat really well. And so rather than just having straight metal contacted to the metal on these things, this forms a nice little bond between the heatsink and the processors so that the heat can conduct more efficiently. It doesn't take a whole lot of this stuff, but it needs to get on there really nice and smoothly. So let me show you how to do this. So this kind of just looks like a syringe. What we're going to do is just put a little line of it right there, like that. And another one right here. Like that. Set that off to the side and then spread it out. You can use any kind of like piece of plastic or something like that, an old gift card or something that you don't want anymore works pretty well. I'm using like an old little ID card for a job that I used to have, and you just want to spread this out nice and evenly here. And add a little bit more as you need it. Doesn't have to be really deeply on there, just enough to form a nice tight bond once you get it up on there. So you want to make sure there are no bubbles or anything in there. That's really important. Just smoothly spread it out there. Back in the other direction here. This is exactly the same procedure that you would do if you were building a PC. So if you've ever done that before, this should be pretty familiar. Try not to get this on the motherboard, though it's not a disaster if you get a little bit on there. Like I said, this is basically doesn't conduct electricity, so it shouldn't short things out. But you know, it's just generally a good idea to try to keep your board pretty clean. And it doesn't take much. Like I said, the layer can be thin. A lot of people really goop this up, and that's actually counterproductive because you just want enough to conduct the the heat. You don't want enough for it to actually start to be causing problems on its own. So you can see the layer I have on here is really thin, just evenly spread out. Make sure you get all the little edges there. So there, looks like that when it's done, evenly spread. Let's do this one. Probably going to need a little bit more. Okay. And we'll spread this. Could use a butter knife or something, probably would work just fine too if you don't have a card like this lying around, but I'd rather not have heavy metals on things that I eat off of. This only needs to go on the processors themselves. Again, sometimes people will mistakenly apply this to both the heatsink and the processor, but that's going to be way too much goop on there. You just want to get it on this end. Good even spread. Okay, there we go. Yeah, that's important. I am a bad person for almost forgetting that. Okay, so what we're going to do now is take this piece and reattach it to the heatsink there. So you can see there's this piece here. This is the capacitor for the power button apparatus that's on the other side. And that's going to line up with this right there. So that's how you know how to orient this. These are also offset a little bit in the same way that these are offset a little bit, but this is really the easiest way to line it up because you want to make sure these all fit in the connections back there. So let's pick this up. Careful, just touch the edges. Are. And just line it up and settle it on there. Again, just like before, those little pegs should line up, and that's how you know that it's seated properly. And now it's on there, and that's the source of all of our sort of stickiness when we first pried it off. Now you can go ahead and bend these back down so that they recover these prongs. The metal's really getting fatigued. It's not going to last much longer. Okay. Good. So now, let's flip this over again. Hold on to it now, because since this hasn't heated up, that bond that was created before that made it so hard to get this off the first time isn't there. So what that means is that board will just fall right off if you let it, which you don't want to do. So now what we're going to do is reattach this fan. And you can see here, there's a little arrow that lines up. So what you want to do is just line that up with the part of it that has the wire coming out there. And just settle that right on there, like that. It locks itself in. Reconnect this little doodad over here onto the board so that it can get power. When you turn it on, you don't want to have the fan not kick on. You ruin all of your hard work by overheating it. Just plug that right in. Make sure it's firmly in there. That. And then we're going to reconnect this fan. And I'm not going to make you watch me do that, so give me just a minute here. Alright, we've got that re-secured, so now we're going to flip this back over. Carefully again, making sure we don't drop that motherboard off, because that's bad. And there we go, so we're back to where we started, more or less there. So the next thing you want to do now is reconnect that ribbon, which is somewhere. If you're a better, more responsible person than I am, you actually keep track of where you set these things. There it is. So remember we had the blue piece facing the back there, and the curve to the top. So just put that right there. And this just slides straight in. That's what she said. God damn it. There, never mind. I'm an idiot. Straight on top there on this one. And you can actually see on this, if you forget how it orients, there's some metal contacts there, and that's going to contact with the metal side on this, so you know it pushes in that way. And then just flip this down so that it locks in again, right? Click. Good. Okay. So now what we're going to do is replace this EM shield. And again, one of the easiest ways to orient this is you can see this part right here is going to line up with those prongs that the power supply is going to sit on. This ribbon, the reason we reconnected that first is because that's going to come up through like that and come through that board, and it's kind of a pain in the ass to make that happen. So then this just sits right down on top of that. And the hardest thing to get here is to get this tab lined up. Good. Like that. And if you're kind of type A, which a lot of people who do this kind of thing are, you're going to want to get those tabs securely in back there too. I'm not. I don't care. That's unusual, I guess, maybe for people who are do-it-yourselfers, but so it goes. So I'm just going to leave those out. What I am going to make sure happens, though, is that this tab there and there lines up so that I'm sure it's sitting on there. And you still want to make sure this pushes down securely back here. And it should be contacted. Yep. And that's nice and down. Good. Next thing we're going to do is reconnect this piece that sits on the back here and just line up all of the pieces with their respective connectors there. It's nice to have this done early on in the process because it makes getting this thing kind of a pain in the ass once you've started to put the case back together. So put this through, and then I'm going to screw all of this stuff back on and reapply these pieces to here. So fill in all of the screws, remember, with the arrows, and hopefully you kept all of your screws separate. And so let's do that, and then we'll come back. Alright, so I've got the these things secured back on now. So the next thing we're going to do, you might notice that these have nowhere to actually screw onto any of these little screw holes. It's just kind of empty space underneath here. That's because that actually attaches to the back case here. So the next step is to seat it back into that case. So we're going to pick this whole piece up